I'll show you how to make these fun leprechaun cupcakes. I'm making the leprechaun hats with the marshmallows on Girl Scout Thin Mint cookies. But the way I've got them sitting on the top of his head means that you don't use a cupcake liner, you just grease the pans and we're gonna pop them out. For the cake itself, I'm tinting half of the batter in green so that I can swirl the green and white batter. You could add mint extract to your cake batter, however, I don't like that, so I'm using a little bit of almond extract and vanilla extract because that is how I love my white cake. I'll show you all the fun things in a minute, but we gotta get those cupcakes in. So preheat your oven to 350 degrees. I'm using 3 eggs, a simple white cake mix, 1 cup of water, I use reverse osmosis, and 1/2 cup of Crisco vegetable oil. And while this is blending, we're going to grease and flour our muffin tins. And try to get it really even and not leave any little chunks or anything in the corners. And then flour the bottoms and sides well and discard the rest of the flour. Okay, we're going to tint half of it green. Okay, so I'm going to estimate about half. That looks good enough. So we'll leave out that for white. And now we're going to mix some green tint into this one. Get it out of there with some toothpicks. And then I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla, a teaspoon of almond, and get that going. If you do use your mint flavoring, you're probably only going to want to put a teaspoon of that in there. Okay, now normally you would use 1 scoop for each cupcake, but I'm using half green and half white. And I'm making only 12 cupcakes instead of 24, so we're going to fill them really high. Green on one side, and then what I'm going to do to each one is just swirl them back and forth. When you swirl these together, try not to touch the sides of the pan where you greased and floured. And if you don't like the swirling idea, just do a half and half. That's cute too. Here I'll do just half of the white and half the green. We want these to really round up high because we want the leprechaun to have a really round face. So do make sure that you fill them to the top of the pan. Okay, we'll test them to see if they're done by putting a toothpick in the thickest one there, making sure it comes out clean. And we're going to let these completely cool. And how I'm going to get their faces to be really smooth is I'm going to use royal icing for that part. Then for the hair and everything, I'll be using regular frosting. So to make royal icing, if you haven't already decorated cookies, or if you need a refresher, you're going to want to use pasteurized egg whites because we're not going to be cooking these eggs. Sift 2 cups of powdered sugar. We're going to add 3 tablespoons of the pasteurized egg whites. And 1 teaspoon of flavoring. Most people will probably use vanilla. As you know, I love almond extract. I'm just stirring this a little bit before I put the beater on so that the powdered sugar doesn't fly everywhere. Now when you're making royal icing for cookies, you want those 2 thicknesses, the firmer one for the outer borders and then the thinner one for the flooding. This time we're going to use kind of a pretty thin one so that it flows off of the cupcakes but isn't too thin that the cake continues to show through. As you can see, it flows pretty well, and what's nice about royal icing is it's nice and smooth, shiny, and it hardens quickly. So now we want to tint this to make it flesh colored, like this color. And normally when you're using royal icing for cookies, you'll use the Wilton gels because you don't want the icing to thin down. But for this, it can go a little bit thinner, so I'm going to go ahead and use regular food coloring. Just 1, 2, 3, 4 drops of yellow, 2 drops of red, and we're going to need just a touch of brown, and I will have to use the Wilton gels for this because they don't make brown in regular food coloring. A little goes a long way with these gels, so I'm just putting the little end of a toothpick in right now. Okay, let's see what color we have. Right now it looks like a person who got a spray tan that's too orange.
Son still wants a cupcake. Still waiting patiently for a cupcake as a good son he is.
My son is still waiting for a cupcake. So then just pop the cupcakes out. And there we go. And I'm putting the royal icing in this little shallow bowl so we can dip their little faces. Now don't worry about getting the edges because that's going to be covered by hair. And don't worry about the very center there where it's dripping because that's going to be covered by his nose. The glaze will dry really fast because it's royal icing and the cupcakes are cooled. And you can go ahead and put the eyes on and the nose because it'll stick to the glaze nicely. These smell so good. Okay, for each cupcake, you're going to take a cupcake liner and press it down backwards. And that's what we're going to set the little face on. We're going to take the mini marshmallows and cut them in half with a pair of kitchen shears so they're thin. These are going to be the little noses. The eyes are these already pre-made eyes. So the eyes go right about here. And then we're going to put his nose just below that. Now for their little mouths, I'm going to use decorating icing that's just store-bought and squeeze it into a tube that's got a fine tip. I'm also going to use this black icing for the straps around their caps. And we're just using regular frosting and I'm going to color it for his hair. This is actually yellow, although it looks orange. So let's get the hair on these guys. Okay, I'm just using a small star tip and I'll start by putting eyebrows on them. Press the tip onto the cupcake and then release the pressure to flare it out. And then you can use a scribe to move it around or define things or make more hairs. Okay, and I'm making the eyebrows a little bit bushy here. I hope I don't offend any of you leprechauns out there, but you do have some eyebrow issues. Now I'll give this guy a mustache. And I'm giving some curly hair and some straight hair and some beards and just different personalities. So now we have some with the curly hair and the straight hair. And then all the young little leprechauns that don't have mustaches and beards. And the reason why I'm not putting the hair around the sides yet is because I'm going to do that after we put the hats on. Okay, for the leprechauns' hats, we're going to use Girl Scout cookies for the base and marshmallows for the top of the hat. And just pick out the best marshmallows you can find that look pretty much like a hat already. Otherwise, you can kind of mold them a little bit. And 12 Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies. So this is what will give your leprechauns just a touch of mint flavor. And all of these things are so fun when you're eating the leprechaun cupcakes because you're pulling different parts off and getting different flavors. Now to make a type of royal icing, really simple, use a regular can of frosting and we're gonna heat it up in the microwave to thin it down. So we've got our little bit set aside for the gold buckle. And to this, we're going to add the green food coloring. And I need to heat it just a little bit more to drizzle it. Okay, we have a nice drizzling consistency now. And the temperature is 127. I have to admit, this is as fun as it looks. It looks like mirror cake glaze flowing on, and then they kind of look like macarons. And I'm going to carefully move these cookies off of the tray so I have more room for the marshmallows. I had these marshmallows in the refrigerator for about 15 minutes so that I could pour the warm frosting over them. If it thickens, you can reheat it in the microwave for about 10 seconds. However, you can only do this about 2 or 3 more times or it will seize like chocolate does and you'll not be able to use it again. While that's in there for 10 seconds, I'm going to try to remove some of these over to the Silpat. You'll need to let these dry before the next step. Now I'm going to use some of that black frosting from the tube to paint the black straps on the leprechaun's hats. And it's up to you whether you find it easier to put it on the marshmallows before you put them on the cookies or after. I like it this way because I've got more to hold on to here and here, and I'm not crushing the marshmallow this way when I'm holding it. I'm going to actually paint the buckles on, and then we'll paint the gold over that. I'm using a fine tip brush to do these buckles, and I'll use the same brush to do the gold. I used a flat brush to do the black band that was the width of that band. And if you're doing the marshmallows before you're sticking them on the cookies, I'll do one of those. Now it does actually seem easier to do these on just the marshmallows. And now I'm using the frosting as glue and gluing the marshmallows to the cookies to make the hats. And now we're going to paint the buckles gold using gold dust. This is edible gold powder made by Lux Cake. You can mix the powder with any clear alcohol or vanilla because it contains alcohol. For this one, I'm adding 1/8 teaspoon of vanilla with just a little less than 1/8 teaspoon of the gold dust. And then I'll show you the comparison of this one with 1/8 teaspoon of vodka and a little bit less than 1/8 teaspoon of the gold dust. This was the one using vanilla, and this one is the one using vodka. They both work just fine. I just prefer the one with the vanilla. And then you'll need to rinse your brushes out in the alcohol. It's just like when you oil paint, you can't use water. Okay, so now you're wondering what these crazy things are. I just cut the crust off of bread and smashed it down to about 1/8 of an inch. And these are going to make sure that the hats don't slide down towards the plate until they're really stuck. I saved the rest of the orange frosting from before so that I could use it now for the hair. It was in the refrigerator, so I just have to knead it a little bit to kind of get it to soften up. Okay, now we're going to glue their little hats on. I use a piece of the bread that we cut. Okay, if you'd like, you could give them some side hair. Just to cover up a little bit more of the bottom of the cupcake. And we'll let that dry overnight, or at least until someone wants to eat it. So give this guy a little bit more hair on the side, so it goes down a little bit further on the cupcake. They are so good. Happy St. Patrick's Day. And you gotta make this. And to see all of my videos, don't forget to click subscribe.